Hello everyone, this is Satyaprakash. Welcome to my channel. This is part 10 of ASP.NET Web API. In this video, we'll discuss how to configure status code for post and get methods in ASP.NET Web API. So I'll suggest you before going through this part 10, please visit my part 9 of ASP.NET Web API, that is use post method in ASP.NET Web API using entity framework. So guys, I'll tell you what are the status code it was showing before implementing the status code in the code. So I'll tell you this is my Swagger UI page. So this is employee controller. So I'll show you that get method with ID parameter. So here I will mention one valid ID. So this is the table name, right? I'll show you in the SQL server. So I want to check this ID 2, right? So here I'll go to Swagger UI. I'll type here 2 and try it out, and we can see the employee details with ID 2, right? And here I get the response code is 200. Okay, so I want to mention here is a invalid ID, that is which is not present in our table. So I want to put here ID 21. So if I'll go here, put here ID 21 and try it out. So with this ID there is no employee details, but still we are getting response code 200, right? So this is not the right way. So we'll configure in our code to get the proper response code based on the data or invalid data. So this is about get method response code, and I'll show you about post method response code, whatever we'll get here. So this is the post method. I want to insert a new record here, right? And I want to insert one new record in our table. So I'll mention here first name is Prakash 1 and last name is Samanth 2, gender is male, and salary is 12,000, right? And I want to insert this new record in our table, and we'll check what are the response code we are getting now. So click on try it out. So guys, here you can see we are inserted a new record and a one request URL generated, and response body is no content and response code is 204, right? And I'll check here, I'll refresh this table, right? And here I need to execute to check the new data. You can see ID is 21 is inserted, but here we got the status code is 204 response code and no content. So this is not right? So the problem here is that since the return type of post method is void, here is the return type is void, right, for post method. So we get the status code of 204 no content. So when a new item is created, we should actually be returning status code 201 item created. So with 201 status code, we should include the location, that is URI, of the newly created item. So to achieve this, we need to change the code here. So I need to stop the debugging. So guys, here I want to implement the status code in our both the method, that is get method with the ID parameter and post method. I already have the code here. This is about get method. So I want to copy this one, go here and replace this code with it. So what this code is, the same thing is there. This line of code is create the instance of SatyaDB entities to create connection with SQL server, and using this object, that is entities, we need to create a variable, that is entities employees date or first or default, and this will return the first element of sequence. And we have mentioned the id parameter, because if the user will assign the id value in the text box, then it will be matched with the database and return the specific employee details. So inside I have mentioned one is for if statement, that is if entity is not null, then it will return the status code OK, that is 200 status code. So return request the create response method. Inside we have mentioned one HTTP status code. It is a enum, right? So if you'll right click on it, go to definitions, and you can see it is nothing but the enum value, right? It's the enum. So you can see that is okay, it is 200, right? So here I have mentioned here HTTP status code dot OK, that means it will return 200 status code, right? Here it is mentioned. Okay, and the description you can see here it is what is this. All right, so and one more thing is, if the entity is not providing any related details of specific id, then it will return the some status code about 404 not found, right? Status code 404. So I'll check here what is the not found value for HTTP status code. So I'll check here not found. If you'll go here where it is not, yes, not found, right? So you can see not found is 404, and if the employee ID is not found, then it will the status code should be 404, and it's the details about this status code that is not found. Okay, so this is about HTTP get method. If the details is found, then it will return 200 OK, and if the ID details is not found, then it will return 404 not found. And one more information I have added for better clarification, that is, if the employee ID is not found, it will return with status code with the employee ID of that specific ID is not found. It will return the message in the URI or location. Alright, and same way we need to implement for post method. So I already have the code. I'll copy this one and go here, replace this code with this value. So this is about status code for post method. So I was using two block, that is one try block, one is catch block, and inside try block I have mentioned the create the instance of SatyaDB entities, and this two lines of code, it will add the employee details, whatever we have provide the details are inside the prom body of employee date employee date class objects. And inside I have created one variable message. So inside I will create one response if the details inserted successfully, and I have passed the parameter of employee date, so it will generate the status code created. So I'll check here what is the status code for created, and I'll go to here, go to definitions. So it will return created means 201, right? And it is equivalent to 201, and you can see the details of here. So if a new employee details is created or inserted in our table, it will return the status code 201, right? So I have mentioned the same thing here. And one more thing is I need to include the location, that is URI of newly created item. For example, if I'll create one new ID, that is we already have 21. If we'll create the new ID of 22, then this line of code include the location, that is URI of newly created item. So and after then I return that message inside the header of that location, right? And inside catch block, if anything will be happen during creation of new employee, so it will return the bad request. So what is the bad request of that enum? So I'll go to here. So you can see bad request means 2400, right? So if the employee data is not inserted, then it will return the 400 bad request. And this is all about the details of that bad request details. Okay guys, so this is all about how to implement the status code in our code for get method with id parameter and for post method. So after that changes, we'll build our solution. So guys, here build is succeeded. I want to run my web API. So guys, here I need to navigate to Swagger UI index. Okay, and click enter. And here I'll expand my employee controller, and I'll check here first the get method whatever we have implemented in our code for HTTP status code. Okay, so first of all I will check the valid employee ID, which is 21 last time I have inserted, and try it out. So guys, here I can see the employee ID with ID 21. You can see here, right? And HTTP status code is 200 okay, right? And I want to check a invalid ID which is not present in our database, so that is 22, and check the try it out. So guys, here you can see request URL is generated with 22, and response body it is showing that message employee ID with ID, that is 22 is not found. It's because in our else statement we have mentioned one create error response if status code, if the ID is not found, then it will show one message that is employee with ID, that specific ID is not found, right? So that it is showing here as a in the response body, and we are getting the response code is 404, right, with which ID is not found. So this is works fine for HTTP get method with ID parameter. So we will check for post method here. So for post method, what I'll do here, I'll create a new employee records. So here I'll mention here Manas, and last name is Sahu, and gender is male, and salary is 14,000, right? So what I'll do here, I'll click here try it out. So guys, response you can check the request URL, it is generated, and response body, that means whatever we have inserted a new record, it shows in the response body, right? And you can, one more thing is a response code, you can check 201, right? And I'll check the same data is inserted in our DB or not. So I will execute in our select statement for that specific table name, and we can see the new record is 22 ID 22. Manos is first name, last name is Sahu, male is gender, 14,000 is salary. And so this is all about the newly created item, it's generated, right? And one more thing is I'll show you, that is location, right? So you can see the response header we have that is in the status code 201 is created for newly created item. And one more thing is also the location, that is the URI of the newly created item. So you can see location section, you can see the newly created item for API employee 22. So these things is generated because of that line of code, right? Message.headers.location, and for you it is location or URI of newly created item, that is request or request URI and slash and employee data dot id, which is recently inserted, that is 22.2 strings. That's what it's showing in the location URI of newly created item of 22 id. Alright guys, so same thing we'll check here in our fiddler. So I'll open this fiddler and remove all these things. Okay, so here I'll check here first get, and what I'll do here, I'll mention here content hyphen type and application forward slash JSON, and here I'll check here get with ID 22, right, and execute this one. So click this one. In the JSON we can see the all the details of ID with 22, right, first name, last name, gender and salary. And we'll check here header section, that is 200 OK. And alright, so this is about valid ID. So we'll check here invalid ID, which is not present in our DB, that is 23. So if you'll execute this one, you can see 1404 is showing, right, 404 not found in the response header. And if you click here JSON, you can see that is message employee with ID equal to 23 not found, and in the header section it is showing the status code to 404 not found. That means the ID is not found. Alright, so here we'll check for the okay, so I'll copy this JSON format to implement here. So we'll check here for the post method. Here I'll remove the ID and I want to newly created item. So one is -1 Sahu1 and female and 15,000. Alright, I want to insert this new record in our DB using post method. So I'll click here. Before that I'll remove all these things and execute this one. So click this and I'll click here JSON tab. I can see the newly created item is showing first name -1, gender female, ID 23, last name Sahu1 and salary 15,000. If you click here header, in the response header is status code is 201 created, and the location or URI of newly created item it is showing here location, that is HTTP localhost, port number, API employee 23, right? So as for the code, it's showing the response header for the status code and the location of that location or URI for the newly created item. So that's all about how to implement status code or configure the location or URI of newly created item for post method using our code. So I'll go to my presentation here. So this is working on status code 201 for post method, working on status code 404 for get method if the ID is not found, and 204 no content status code. That means it is showing whenever we created a new item before implementing the status code in our code. And 20 OK status code is nothing but if any ID is found of that employee details. What is location or URI? So URI is nothing but uniform resource identifier. So URI is the request superset of URL. It is a string of characters that defines a resource on the web either while using location, name or both. URI provides a technique for defining the identity of an item. So here guys we discuss some important points to remember. So here that is, if a method return type is void, then default status code is 204 no content is returned, and when a new item is created we should be returning the status code 201 item created. With 201 status code we should also include the location, that is URI of newly created item. And when an item is not found, I'll show you for get method with ID parameter. So when an item is not found, instead of returning null in the response body and status code 20 OK, it will return 404 not found status code along with a meaningful message, that is employee ID with that specific ID, that is 23 or 24 is not found, right? And this is my channel. Subscribe and share it to get the updated knowledge on .NET, .NET Core, C Sharp, SQL Server, Angular, GitHub and DevOps. So what we have learned today in this video, that is what is status code for post method 201 and working on status code 404 for get method. What is 204 no content status code? It is because of return type is void for post method. And what is 200 OK status code and what is location or URI and how to set in our code. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.